In this very important chapter, we're going to look at adding finishing touches to our projects. So first up, we're going to look at something called fog, which may not seem like it comes in handy, but it really does. In this example, we have red fog in the back, which creates this illusion that these objects are receding into the distance. If we hop on over to the fog start comp, we don't see that, and that really prevents the composite from being believable here. Now let's quickly go over to the landscape comp where we have a real world photo so we can understand what this fog idea means. In the real world, like if I was going to talk to my mom and say, hey mom, what's fog? She would think that it means kind of like a smokiness. And it's not really the smokiness that we talk about when we're working with fog and compositing. It's really this attribute of real world environments that creates this blend of the sky tone with tones in the background as they get farther away. For example, if we look at the info panel here, while I drag my cursor around the sky, we'll see that there's more blue than any other color in the sky. And as we put our cursor over these green trees, we can see that the blue level is about maybe 60, 50, 70, depending on where I am, but that's the average. And if we go farther back, these same trees, the blue level is now 80 to 90. And if we go even farther back where it's dark, it gets even higher. Well, still in the 80 to 90 range, maybe high 90s. And that is because that as these trees go back in the distance, they are blending more with the sky, and so they're getting more blue. So even when we aren't dealing with a motion graphics example like this, where we have actual fog and smoke in the background that we want to blend with, it still pays to use fog to make objects look like they're receding back into the distance. So let's go over to the fog start comp. Here's how this works. We'll go to element, open up the render settings area, then open up fog. And by the way, the render settings area and also the output area is where most of these final touches that we're going to be looking at in this chapter are stored. So we open up fog, and the first thing we want to do is enable it. I've already chosen the correct color for you, but we need to put this in the right spot. We need to change the start distance and the range. And one of the things that's kind of confusing is that the range refers to the spread, the feathering of the fog. So it's kind of hard to see exactly where it is. So if I take the range to 0, then we have a hard and fast area of demarcation between fogged areas and non-fogged areas. So now we can increase the start distance until we start to see where we want the fog to start. Now I actually want the fog to start a little bit earlier, maybe like a midpoint of some of these balls there, just a little bit on these middle ones. And then I could increase the range, which again softens everything so I don't have as much fog, but that's exactly what I want here. So again, we could see the before and the after. This again really helps our composite, especially because there's actually animation in this, and there's these spheres are circling around the y-axis here, and as they come around, they don't have the fog. As they get closer to the camera, they come out of that fog, and that's something you just could not recreate with masks or any other trickery. We really need this fog parameter. Now, one more quick example. Let's go over to the text example comp where we see some text that we made earlier. And throughout this chapter, we're going to be seeing how some of these properties also relate to the text. We can see them in multiple situations. So let's open up render settings and fog. And here I have not touched any parameters. Let's go ahead and enable the fog by clicking the checkbox. And again, one of the things I like to do just to make sure that I could see where the fog is, because the default range is 3000, which makes a really soft fog, is I like to crank up the opacity to 100%. And I also like to take the range down to 0, just so I could see exactly where my fog is. That silhouette's pretty awesome there. Now I'm going to increase the start distance to push that fog back a little bit. And that looks pretty good right about there. And now we can increase the range. And if we need to, we can bring the start distance back a little bit. Take down the range to make that a little bit sharper. And now we have kind of almost like a vignette in Z-space. So we can kind of fade out the background elements if we want to. And we can go back here to opacity and maybe dial that back a little bit so it's not as harsh. But again, there's the before and after, and things can look a lot better and more polished and composite better by using fog.